Hello, it is I, your friendly neighborhood spreadsheet whore, and today I am coming at you with an unexpected stats video. By unexpected, I mean that I didn't plan on filming a reading stats video for 2019 because I only read 15 books, so there's not a lot of statting to be done. But then I had a look at my spreadsheet of my reading tracker for 2019 and was getting very excited about all of my reading stats, and I thought, why not spread this joy with the world? So I'm going to share with you some of the stats about the books that I read in 2019. So in 2019, as I've said several times already, I read 15 books. Of these 15 books, only 3 were written by men, which actually surprised me because I always thought that I tended to read a lot more men than women, but never really was brave enough to look into it very deeply. Obviously this year, at least, that proportion was considerably smaller, and I am very grateful for it. None of the books that I read were by non-gender binary authors, which is a bit disappointing, but I'm still pretty happy with the fact that I managed to read more women in fiction this year and give some support to some good old female authors. In terms of gender, over half of the books that I read were fantasy, which is pretty much laughing in the face of my 2019 reading goal of trying to not read as much fantasy. The next most popular genres that I read for the year were classics, which I read 3 of, and non-fiction books, which I also read 3 of. Non-fiction is something that I, again, read more of than I expected because I didn't go out of my way to read any non-fiction books at all, but I just happened to find some non-fiction books that I was interested in and ended up with that being one of my more popular genres of the year, if you can call it that when I'm extrapolating from a data set of 15 books. So my average rating for all of the books that I read in 2019 was 3.5 stars, which I thought was a lower average than usual, but looking back at my 2018 reads, my average for that year was also 3.5 stars. So apparently that's pretty on par with just how I tend to rate things in general. That being said, of all the books that I read, only one of them was a 5-star read, whereas the previous year 6 of the books that I read were 5-star reads, which was a little bit disappointing. Like I said, I did have a pretty reading year last year. Most of them were average, but not particularly exciting. I had a lot of 4.5-star reads, but yeah, only one book that I would consider to be a 5-star read. The next little series of stats aims to answer 2 very important questions in any reader's life, which is, how do I get my books and why do I get my books? So in terms of how I get my books, of all the books that I read last year, 6 of them were books that were lent to me or given to me by friends and family members. 4 of them were books that I already owned on my bookshelves that I picked up to read, and 4 of them were books that I bought especially to read. In terms of the why, which is honestly my favorite thing to look at when it comes to any reading stats, 5 of the books that I read last year were books that I read because of BookTube and the BookTube community, which I was really happy with, particularly considering that a lot of them were some of my highest rated reads of the year. One of them was a book that I read for university, which probably should be higher, but I didn't finish any of the other books that I read for university. 3 of them were recommendations from friends and family here in Australia with me. 3 of them were random impulse buys, and 3 of them were continuations of series that I am currently reading. So I really like looking at this kind of stat because it shows me the reasons why I end up feeling compelled to pick up a book and read it, and I like the fact that the BookTube community influences my reading so much. It's part of the reason why I love being involved in BookTube, is because of the fact that I do actually get recommendations and ideas and for books that I want to read from BookTube. So it's really nice to see that actually sort of play out into the stats for the books that I read last year, and also it's really nice to see them play out into being some of my higher rated books as well. And one final thing which I nearly forgot to add to my stats list this year is this amazing chart. Look at this graph of the year in which all of the books that I read were published. So as you can see, most of the books that I read in 2019 were published in the last decade, and a significant portion of them were actually published in the last couple of years, which is quite unusual for me because up until I joined BookTube, I never really paid attention to books that were current and currently being released. So I can only assume that the reason why so many of the books that I read last year were recent releases is because of the fact that I have been a part of the booktube community and have seen people talk about books as they were released and talk about how good they were or how much they love them, and sort of absorbed those recommendations. That being said, I did end up reading a few books that were released in the early 1900s, and also one book that was written in the 1800s, which would have been one of the classics that I read. This tends to be a pretty significant trend in all of my years of reading. A lot of them are either basically very recent or very much not recent, with very little in between, because of the fact that I tend to either read fantasy, which was released within the late 1900s to early 2000s, or I read classics, which were published much earlier than that. And this chart is no exception, in spite of the fact that it doesn't have many books on it. So that concludes my reading stats for 2019, a very short and very sweet video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to being able to keep this as a record of what my reading was like for 2019 and to compare it to future years. I do have a video of some of my reading stats for 2018 as well, if you're interested in seeing how my reading has progressed or changed or stayed the same. If you also filmed a stats video for 2019, please do let me know in the comments, because I would love to have a look at it. Let me know, or link it down below in the comments. I will see you for another video very shortly, I am sure. And until then, as always, stay classic. Bye.
Sit there and count your little fingers. Unhappy little girl blue.